Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next session here of ABARES. This session is entitled The Future of Biosecurity, and we'll have a really good discussion today about what that means and some of the issues around that. Before we begin, though, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're meeting today. For me, in Shepparton, in the Goulburn Valley, it is Yorta country. For you, I no doubt know that you would know where you're meeting on in the lands of the people and acknowledge their elders emerging past and present as well. I'm Warwick Long. I'm the host of the Victorian Country Hour for ABC Rural in Victoria, obviously, and we spend a lot of time talking about biosecurity issues and really interested in the topic today, the future of biosecurity, because there's always a future when we're talking biosecurity, isn't it? Whether it be those formerly future pests that have arrived on our shores, things like fall armyworm and Russian weed aphid in recent years, to the constant discussions about what could happen around things like varroa mite, foot and mouth disease, and capra beetle, and in fact, the list goes on and on. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, talking about with people from industry and people working in this space about what they see the future to look like, but also what some of the technology and improvements and different issues that might arise over that journey. So to set the scene, let's begin today with a message from Andrew Metcalfe, who is the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. In fact, he has been since that department's inception back in 2020, and he can welcome you all here today as well. Take it away, Andrew.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Day 3 of the National ABARES Outlook Conference for 2022. May I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, the Ngunnawal people, and pay respects to their elders past and present in their own language. Daranuna, Daranunawal. This is Ngunnawal country. Yangu, Nalamanyin, Dunamanyin. Today we are all meeting together on Ngunnawal country. Ngunnawalwari, Dawawari, Dindi, Wangara Linjin Nin. We acknowledge and pay respects to the elders. This is my third conference since our new department was established, building on the foundations of two long-standing, strong and very important national portfolios. Our responsibilities are fundamental to every Australian because our land, our seas and our waterways define our prosperity and our way of life. By bringing together agriculture, water, environment into a single department, we've now brought together an incredible range of skills and knowledge and expertise to bear on the overall management of Australia's living natural resources. I'm incredibly proud of what our people achieve individually in their work. United, they are more than the sum of their parts. And that work, of course, becomes exponentially more valuable with you, our many partners across industry and the broader community. As we set out to deliver the government's Ag 2030 plan, supporting the farm sector's ambition of a $100 billion agriculture industry by 2030, it's vital that we protect and grow our environmental, water and biodiversity achievements. These goals are not mutually exclusive. By necessity, they are complementary. And that basic principle of building on our collective knowledge across a range of highly specialised fields to deliver new and better outcomes extends right across our portfolio. What our scientists in the Australian Antarctic Division learned today, for example, will shape our understanding of biosecurity and weather and climate into the future. It's perhaps little recognised but vital work for all Australians. Because the National Biosecurity System is a pillar of the continued prosperity of our industries, our environment and our natural resources, while globalisation has opened doors to growth and opportunity to Australia, it's also brought more exotic pests and diseases to our doorstep. So our biosecurity system must naturally evolve to meet the demands of constant global change. Commonwealth Biosecurity 2030 is our roadmap to do that. And we're also working with our colleagues in the states and territories and other key areas of industries to develop the National Biosecurity Strategy, which will be a strategic approach to ensuring a risk-based biosecurity system that continues to protect Australia's health, economic, environmental and national security interests. Partnering with our stakeholders to ensure strong governance is essential. So at the border, we're working closely with the Department of Home Affairs and the Australian Border Force to digitise incoming passenger declarations allowing us to better target biosecurity risks. And we're working closely with industry to develop transformative solutions that revolutionise the end-to-end biosecurity management of inbound cargo. Trials will soon be underway at the Port of Melbourne, and with imports where we're piloting green lane solutions. Funding, of course, is critical. And this year, over $1 billion is available to biosecurity. And that funding is already supporting new technology, research and innovation, and of course all our business as usual. We're harnessing the power of eDNA technology to detect biosecurity pests and pathogens from environmental samples. With CSIRO, we're exploring the use of biosensors at the airport that could detect the specific odours and chemicals in a range of risk items. CSIRO call it the cyber nose. Machine learning and novel automation solutions applied to cargo imports promise to significantly streamline biosecurity interventions at the border, delivering regulatory cost savings and time savings to our industry partners. Our people are vital to our success, and we are carefully planning for a biosecurity workforce that has skills and flexibility to respond in a changing risk environment. Indeed, earlier this year, Minister Littleproud announced a new National Biosecurity Training Centre that will underpin a skilled and agile workforce into the future. And we're very carefully considering the regulatory environment required to allow us to respond effectively to biosecurity challenges now and into the future. So have we done enough? The short answer, of course, is that there's always more to do. We can always do better and more to adapt to changing circumstances. Indeed, the stakes are too high and the risks too volatile for us to ever consider easing efforts to improve and enhance the national biosecurity system. So I'm really delighted to see today's conversation and welcome a panel that brings practical experience and extremely well-informed perspective to these challenges. Malcolm Letts from the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries in Queensland, Kathleen Plowman from Animal Health Australia, Sarah Corcoran from Plant Health Australia, and Sal Milici from the Freight and Trade Alliance. Like our partnerships across the portfolio, this panel is more than the sum of its parts, and our panellists bring a grounded focus on the investments and shared responsibility that our collective future success depends on. I can't think of a more appropriate representation to consider the challenges that we face, and that there is no better time for the conversation than now. So I'll leave you in their capable hands and look forward to the outcomes from their discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew Metcalfe there, Secretary of the Department, with a strong endorsement for the panel. I hope you can all live up to his message today. We're about to find out. Now, in the interest of time, we will go to all our panellists in just a moment and get them to really set the scene on what they see as important to cover off on this panel here today. Before we do that, though, you can put in your questions today and you can vote on which questions you'd like to hear. On the left of your screen, I believe, you can tap in there, put your question, and then vote up or a question that you would like to hear asked of our panel, and we'd love to get to as many of those today as possible. But let's begin today, and we'll begin with Malcolm Letts from the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries in Queensland. He's a Deputy Director General and Chief Biosecurity Officer for that state. Malcolm, let's just to start with you. Love the idea about you talking about the complexities of biosecurity and how that can be made into opportunities in sort of diagnosing and managing biosecurity in the country. Would you like to start us off today?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. And I'll take a bit of a lead from Andrew as well in relation to the potential that technology provides to us at this stage. We've got a fantastic biosecurity system in Australia, and probably only New Zealand is the only other country in the world that looks anything like what we've got. But we are a federation, and that creates its own set of challenges, as we've seen through COVID. As part of that federation, Wendy Craik undertook a review of the Intergovernmental Agreement back in 2017, not long after I came into the biosecurity space. And she identified that in that review that technology and investment in the national system was critically important. And so we've done some work over the last few years in relation to identifying some of those opportunities that's led to some work that we've been doing. But in addition to that, as Andrew outlined, there's a whole range of applications that are being used. Machine learning's come into into the space. Social media and the ability to reach a whole lot of people very quickly feed directly into the surveillance piece, for example. So being able to alert the people of the Gold Coast that we had a brown marmorated stink bug incursion recently was very, very beneficial for us. We had lots of reports coming in. They're all native stink bugs, fortunately, but people were on the lookout and were able to do that through our social media. So technology has and continues and will in the future present a whole range of benefits for us. When we did that work only 3 short years ago around identifying some of the priorities for investment at a national level in technology, it was pre-COVID. Since COVID, we now have synthetic vaccines. We have the capacity to do things very quickly using vaccine production systems that are very different to those that we've used in the past, such as live cultures and others. So I think we are seeing enormous opportunities opening up across the board that we can use a whole range of these sorts of technologies for. Thanks, Warwick.
Thanks very much for that, Malcolm. I'm looking forward to exploring that a little bit more. We're very lucky to have representatives of both the plant and animal industries here for us, and I'm actually a little nervous as to decide to who to go to first. So in the interests of transparency, I've gone via the list in front of me, so please don't think I'm picking animals over plants, but we will go to Animal Health Australia and Kathleen Plowman now. Kathleen, you want to talk about shared responsibility. Is that something that we talk about in documents, or is it something that you can do in reality? I don't know if we got you, Kathleen. Audio wise. Oh, there we go.
Yes, good idea to take me off mute. Look, I believe that shared responsibility is integral to the success of our future, the future sustainability and prosperity of our nation. Now, shared responsibility, it's not a new term. If I look back about what the state and territory governments have been doing in this area when they've been reviewing their biosecurity acts over the last several years, they've been putting shared responsibility in their state and territory strategies at that centrepiece. But it's easy to say, which is why when I was asked what do I want to talk about, it's about whether shared responsibility is a reality or rhetorical. And I feel that we've got a lot more to do in this space. I was really taken by Andrew Metcalfe when he talked about people are vital for our success. So if we're going to have shared responsibility, we also need to be sharing that decision making. We need to be far more active in connecting the systems. As Andrew said, united we're so much stronger. We're only as strong as the sum of our parts. So while I work in the animal health sector, and I would say, a decade or so ago, it was a lot easier just to focus on that area. But I'm interested in what's happening in other sectors because farmers, for example, livestock farmers, they just don't farm livestock. They're also, looking out for pests and weeds, and they often also farm horticulture or grains. So we really need to be looking very carefully and having not just an active discussion around this, we need to be changing some of the way the cultures of our institution. We need to be helping businesses plan and put in place their own biosecurity plans, because unless we get shared responsibility right, we won't have the resilient biosecurity system that we need to protect our way of life.
Thank you, Kathleen. Kathleen Plowman there. We'll bring in Sarah Corcoran now from Plant Health Australia as well. And you want to talk about the power of partnership. So that probably flows well to what Kathleen's talking about, whether shared responsibility is something that comes up in a document or how you make that a better reality. Tell us about partnerships.
Thanks, Warwick. And yes, it's a pleasure to be here. What Kathleen was talking about in terms of shared responsibility, you're absolutely right. From shared responsibility comes partnership or builds partnership, or perhaps from partnership, we share responsibility. So the two are intertwined. But one thing I would point out is that the shared responsibility, it's not only sharing responsibility for action, but it's also sharing the benefits that come from that action. And they are the partnerships. So in order for us to build a strong and resilient national biosecurity system, we need those partnerships for it to happen. We also need effective and efficient response mechanisms in place. And that's something that is unique, again, to Australia, as Malcolm said. You know, in globally, we are recognised as one of the strongest biosecurity systems to exist. And that's through partnerships. That's through partnerships with government and industry. It's through partnerships with community, our local land care groups, local governments. Everyone has a role to play. And yeah, it's what brings strength to the system. The impacts of pests and diseases, as we know, in agriculture, they've been there for a long time. And agriculture's been experiencing disruptions to their supply chains, you know, closing down of properties with concerns around pests and diseases. And we don't want to see that happen. We'd much rather see the work done in the preparedness space, so that if that does have to happen, people aren't out of business or not able to trade for too long. We want them to be able to step back into the space quickly and recover from any of those impacts. And in order to do that, it comes through the preparedness activities that we invest in, and equipping our industries for that next event, because we know that there's plenty more coming across the horizon towards us.
Thank you, Sarah. And our last guest on the panel today is Sal Milici, who is the head of border and biosecurity at the Freight Trade Alliance. You can see that plastered behind him there. Sal, you're really interesting to me in terms of this panel, because I see you as a lot where the rubber hits the road in terms of things coming into the country. We're at a time, and I know we've had a lot of stories on this recently from nearly every import or export industry, talking about the strain on shipping and what COVID has done and how difficult it is. So everyone's looking for more efficiencies and to move trade so easily. We're also talking today about better biosecurity. So are these things mutually exclusive, or can you see them working together?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick, and thanks to everyone for inviting me on today. It's a real privilege to join everyone on this panel. You raise an interesting point that the whole industry is really struggling just with the way shipping is dysfunctional at the moment. So there's challenges getting goods into a container and onto a ship. You know, really high cost, but just really logistical problems. And then similarly, challenges when navigating the border through some of the challenges that the Department of Agriculture have had. So there's a lot going on for our membership. You know, I wanted to talk about stronger biosecurity safeguards and smoother trade facilitation. And I asked, you know, are they mutually exclusive? And I really think the answer is, you know, a resounding no, that they're not. Some of the things that Andrew and Metcalfe were talking about are really exciting and definitely the way that we need to go. We need more technology to just smoothen that process for the, I think the goods that are coming into the country that we think are low risk, to really confirm that they're low risk and sort of get them out of the system. Because then we want those vital and limited human resources to be really focusing on those high risk pests that could be coming in, and those potential ones like you know, ASF and Capra beetle. Yeah, again, going back to what Andrew Metcalfe was talking about, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening, but you know, we've been engaged with industry and government and the department on that for a while now, and I guess my members would be saying when. You know, a lot of them are trials, a lot of them are in the pipeline, a lot of them are being rolled out, but it's not being felt yet at the pointy end, at the front line, and you know, we're eager to see that sort of happening.
Beautiful. And there's some fantastic questions coming in. We're going to start rolling through them now. I suppose, given this is the panel looking at the future of biosecurity, I'd just love to quickly ask you, and there was a question along these lines earlier too, just what does the future look like for biosecurity problems, and how is that different from what we're experiencing today? Malcolm, would you like to start us off on that?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. All of the analysis would indicate that the biosecurity risks are just going to continue to increase. And we know, as much as we'd like to have an impervious border, the reality is that we saw from fall armyworm, for example, that it's just not possible to build a curtain that goes, 5 kilometres into the air. So there will always be ongoing risks. We now have African swine fever, 4 kilometres from Australian territory. There's a whole, we have BMSB arriving on a regular basis. Lots of technology going into protecting that border, and that's fantastic. I think the other part that we're seeing is this whole capacity to mobilise the community. So citizen science and its use in surveillance, I think, is critically important. We're using a range of those sorts of tools already in relation to tracking things like trade in illegal plants. That you'd be amazed how much of that's happening, already in Australia. Andrew mentioned machine learning. Machine learning continues to refine a remote sensing application we are developing for tramp ants, specifically for fire ants. So that we are improving all the time in relation to how those things work, because we have an expectation that we will need to continue. And it's fantastic the Commonwealth is investing so much in the border protection, but we will need to continue to manage incursions as they arrive, and we need to do that very much through the surveillance space, get to them early, knock them out early, rather than having to deal with very widespread incursions. Thanks, Warwick.
Sal, I might come back to you on this. What do you see as issues arising in the future that are different to what you're experiencing today?
I think probably Capra beetle is the one that stands out, because it kind of encapsulates everything that's changing, and that is probably because of the pandemic. In a lot of situations, we're now getting containers coming into the country that had never come to Australia before. So they were probably transiting between two Capra beetle countries potentially, but now just the way trade has been jumbled up, we've got now those sort of containers coming here. Capra beetle, potentially evolving packaging methods is something that has come across my radar around Capra beetle. Increase in sustainability where glues used are now more biodegradable. I think one of the major outbreaks, the baby high chairs from Italy, that beetle was found in the packaging. So that's potentially something out. So I think it's taught us quite a number of things, but mainly the thing is that it's taught us is that it's now coming in shipments of what is classed as low-risk goods from low-risk countries. So those traditional methods of risk assessment where you're looking at the commodity or where the goods are coming from aren't working. So what's really needed is contact tracing for containers, which we've all sort of become familiar with contact tracing over the last few years. Ideally, the ability to, if something's found, trace back where that container's been and sort of see where it's been picked up. That information either doesn't exist or isn't shared, but I think that is, for me, the sort of the silver bullet going forward, is that contact tracing for containers.
So are we talking QR codes on the side of containers, or how does it work in your mind, Sal?
That would be ideal. I think recording the information at the time of packing is something that's a potential. You could ideally get all the shipping lines to share that information with all the biosecurity agencies around the world. I think that, if I could make that happen overnight, I would do that, but that's a challenge. They all have varying appetite to collaborate and varying IT savviness. So, ideally, getting 5 years worth of history is a challenge now, but I think we should just start getting the data now, and recording it at the time of packing is something we're exploring on a project we're working with the department at the moment.
I'll come to Kathleen and Sarah now. You can comment on things you see in the future as well, but there was also a question here talking about shared responsibility and partnerships being one thing, but how do you then bring the community involved and encourage a government industry and community investment in something like biosecurity. And given they were topics that you raised to start this off, I thought you might like to jump in on that. What are your thoughts, Sarah? I might go to you first on this. That idea of sort of taking it further from talking about partnerships and talking about shared responsibility to getting the whole of community involved. How do you do that?
Yeah, look, I do. I think there's a massive social science piece to be done around biosecurity. And, you know, for many years, people have been working very quietly behind the scenes to make sure that our lands and seas are protected from these invasive pests and weeds and diseases. But that hasn't necessarily been celebrated. So everyone, as we said, has a role to play. Citizen science is an emerging, or you know, has been there for a while. And if it weren't for the Australian public, we wouldn't know about things like, as Sal mentioned, that capra beetle that was detected in the packaging of imported goods. We wouldn't know about that if it wasn't reported. We wouldn't know about a brown marmorated stink bug arriving in someone's luggage, returning back to Australia and spending time in a quarantine hotel with it. So yeah, there's a massive social science piece, and I think if the general public understood better that the investment that's made currently in biosecurity by all of the partners that invest in it is that the beneficiaries are far broader than just those people that are investing in it, and it's a tool that we can use to engage others along the supply chain and into communities. So if people understood that, you know, your growers are investing in strong, healthy, protected production of plant and animal products and seafood, that underpins a fresh and consistent supply. And we all know what happens when there's a disruption to supply. We've all experienced it now through COVID. If we had a large-scale biosecurity event, or if we had multiple biosecurity events happening at the same time, we could see similar impacts with our supply chain.
Kathleen, I might come to you on that and the idea of, using that to bring better approaches then as well, not only investment between government, industry and community. How do you see that working?
Well, what I'd like to see in the future is that, you know, biosecurity is a mainstay of our education system. So, I mean, that's part of the social science piece. You know, we've had great campaigns such as our sun campaigns, slip, slop, slap. Everybody knows that. I mean, my days when I went to school, no one wore a hat, you know, but everyone, it's become the language of the people. So I'd like to see that in the first instance. As Sarah said, there's already sectors doing a great deal, but they're not connected up. It's how do we get better at that? I was very taken. I was listening to the Drought Resilient Farms session earlier this week, and Cindy Cassidy, the director of Southern New South Wales Drought Resilient and Innovation Hub, really said it best. She said, changing people is the most important piece of this work. It's seriously, and we heard Andrew Metcalfe say how important people are. So we need to be investing in this, not just at the educational level, starting with our kids early, but we need, as Sarah said, that social science piece, talking to people in the language and the things that they value. Now, that's why I think the drought and innovation hubs are being so successful. And I would like to see us in carrying that movement into the biosecurity space. How do we better leverage what's already there? I mean, I could see some opportunities in those hubs around making those connections, better understanding what's important to people in those regions. One of the things, we all know biosecurity is important. We all know that as a nation, and we've all felt the impacts of COVID. And now we have some great opportunities to look at where was the system weak, where was there gaps? I mean, we can see that there's been challenges in our food supply chain. So if I were talking to my livestock producer, I'd be asking, I know you've got biosecurity practices in place, but have you taken them to the next level? Are you asking your input providers, what are their biosecurity plans? What are they doing to protect their business? And what are you doing around what you know about your supply chain further down? What biosecurity practices have they got in place? We know that, the Commonwealth does a great job at the border protecting us, and pre-border, as the Minister said, the investment in technology, and he gave the example of New Zealand. When you can hop on the plane, they'll know what's in your bag before you arrive. And I can see that being expanded into other airports. But we as Australians have an opportunity too. We have our own borders. We have our house borders, and we all experience that when we went into lockdown or quarantine. But we should also be looking as farmers. I know what I'm doing in my border, but I also have an interest in what's happening at the borders around me. So I think there's a lot we can do in this social science piece. I don't think it's sufficient to say to ask people to do this for the public good, because we all nod, we all agree it is in our best interest. It is in the interest of the prosperity of our nation and to protect those things that we value and love in our environment and wildlife. But we're all very, very busy. And I think, as Sarah said, there's a social science piece here. We need to invest in it now, not later. And we need to be speaking in the language of the people we want to motivate to change.
Malcolm, you want to add to this? What would you like to say?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. Just following on from Kathleen, we've done some behavioural research work for the pig industry over the last couple of years on the back of the threat from African swine fever, which has placed us in a really nice position to understand the nature of the industry now that we've got Japanese encephalitis outbreaks in Australia. And what that tells us is that the production end of the industry is pretty well organised. They employ their own vets. They are very alert to biosecurity threats and what they need to do to take responsibility in relation to that space. But there's a very long tail to the industry, and part of that tail are pot-bellied pigs, people that sit on the couch and watch TV with their pigs, that have no sense of what a biosecurity threat is. And so how do we reach those people? How do we get them to understand their responsibilities in relation to these biosecurity threats? And I think the behavioural research work that we've done gives us some insights. I think, obviously, it's very easy to think about using machine learning image scanning to see those people who have got images of pigs on their Facebook pages, for example, and push information out to them. During the white spot disease outbreak in Queensland, we pushed out to nearly 700,000 recreational fisher people who had on their Facebook pages some image, something to do with fishing, because obviously we wanted to get to them about the message in relation to not using supermarket prawns for bait. So that technology is there. I think we can take that further in relation to how we understand what's out there in the internet world to reach more people and help them become more aware of what their responsibilities are for their benefit. I'm sure those people with pot-bellied pigs don't want them to get Japanese encephalitis. Thanks, Warwick.
Especially if you're going to be watching TV on the couch with it. That's a new one to me. Thank you, Malcolm. I'll stay with you, actually, because there's a question here I think you'd like to start with. It says, how important is the data underpinning our current biosecurity systems and future ambitions, such as using machine learning models? Do we need to properly invest in data infrastructure, particularly in collecting crucial regional data, so that we can continue to identify biosecurity risks and their potential impact on the economy?
Yeah, this is obviously critical, and there's a whole range of dimensions associated with this. I can report that the states and territories are working very close together in this space at the moment. So Victoria's taking the lead in relation to providing some support on an IT platform that we are all sharing, and that's going to give us greater capacity. We're all building our own IT systems in terms of collecting that data, being able to have a register of livestock owners, for example, in Queensland that goes across all species, has been a huge undertaking that we've done over the last 4 years. So all of that data is meaningless unless you actually have some mechanism to mine it, to make sense of it, to analyse it, to do all of those sorts of things to generate some options for dealing with a whole range of different risks. We've also, I'm really excited to announce that we are currently investing in a system called the Biosecurity Commons. This is a groundbreaking project that's delivering cloud-based decision support platform for modelling and analysing biosecurity risks. Our partners are the Australian Government, the Australian Research Data Commons, SEBRA are right in there, Griffith University eCommons, and the Atlas for Living Australia. And we've got a couple of other universities that are expressing interest. So we're creating this collective of people who have an interest in doing exactly what I just said with the data, making some sense of it, taking it, making some sense of it. Having access to it is obviously critically important. So timely access to data is something that we are working together on at a national level as well. Thanks, Warwick.
And just quickly on that, Malcolm, I think a lot of us realise what happens with data these days, particularly, you Google hamburgers, you get hamburger ads in your social media feeds for the next, week of your life. But do you think there's still some hesitancy or reluctance in government spaces to use those tools that clearly advertisers are using to make sure you get the biosecurity message out there?
I'm not sure about reluctance. Obviously, there's the privacy consideration that governments are very concerned about. And can I just take the opportunity to do a call out to AHA and PHA, who are unique organisations, and they really do give us that partnership that we were talking about in relation to industry and the capacity to do things potentially that governments can't do in their own rights because of some of those restrictions that we have placed on government. So, but I think that those social media platforms that listen to you and post ads, they get around the privacy laws because they're not publishing information about you. So I think we can actually do a lot more in that space. I think there's potential to invest more, in relation to raising public awareness around some of the risks. We're doing a lot of work at the moment in Queensland on fire ants and community, working with the community, trying to understand where they're coming from in relation to fire ants and using social media platforms to do that. And we've got some very good people working on that for us at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Malcolm. We've had a mention of fire ants. I'm a bit worried because we were talking about how we could spend hours talking about that before this session began with Kathleen and Sarah. Sarah, I might come to you and feel free to add anything on what we've been speaking about already. But there is a question here too, which I think would be interesting, particularly in the plant space. It says, what are the emerging opportunities to improve biosecurity surveillance and management of biosecurity risks in the context of global supply chains and climate change? It's that and climate change which interests me, particularly for the area that you're looking about, because is climate change responsible for some of the recent incursion of pests making its way into Australia and spreading? And how do you see its role in keeping pests out of what you're looking after?
Certainly another dimension for us to be aware of and to, again, utilise tools that are available to us. So if there's modelling tools that could, we input information into and it spits out some results around, all right, these are the things that you need to be aware of, that it might be coming across the horizon to you. We also know that the variability in climate, and this is being monitored longitudinally, so, very long-term studies to understand what the impacts of that are on our cropping areas in Australia. So, cooler nights or temperature variability may mean that trees may not set fruit. So we won't be seeing production in the same way that we have previously. And so, there's vulnerability in the plant life, which means that there's potentially vulnerability of those plants to pests and diseases. It's a really great question, and one that I guess as time goes on, we will understand better as long as we invest the time and effort in trying to understand it. I think also with just on the data discussion, I really enjoyed listening to Malcolm's description of all of the activities that are happening. And I think, when you talk to most people, they're very happy to adopt something if they can see a value in it. They want to be assured that there's privacy if they're sharing their information. But we do have so many social platforms through socials, etc., where we can send out a lot of information quickly, and people's attention spans are relatively short these days. So, that messaging's got to be constantly changing. But we can expect that people will pick up on information through those channels. I think the other thing about data that we possibly didn't quite touch on as much was the criticality of it to trade. And as Andrew Metcalfe said in the introduction, you know, it's Australia's ambition to have a $100 billion farm gate value by the year 2030. That's not too far away. And without a strong biosecurity basis in our producers in Australia, we won't reach that target. So yeah, as we've been talking about this morning, it's about investing now so that we're prepared for that future. We can see what the risks are going to be. So let's start investing.
Kathleen, we'll come back to you. Sal, sit tight. I know I've had you there for a while, but we'll come to you in a sec. Kathleen, this question here says COVID has demonstrated the fragility of global supply chains. How important is it to develop self-reliance via the local manufacture of vaccines and pesticides? In the animal health space, is that going to be a key to, say, some disease incursions? Is the manufacture of vaccines locally? Is it already the case?
Well, I do think that we have a weakness here and a gap. COVID, as the question alluded to, has certainly shown us that, and we do need to build our abilities and our capacity in this space. I'm aware that the New South Wales government has, I believe, and one of our listeners might know more, around $96 million to build a facility to enable the manufacture of RNA vaccines. So I think what COVID has shown us, that there are gaps which are just not mutually exclusive to one sector, such as human health. They're actually, and this role of technology, by the way, when we look at it holistically and not just as a single issue, we can see that, you know, there's an opportunity here for the manufacture of RNA vaccines for livestock, not just for exotic diseases such as Japanese encephalitis or African swine fever, if we should get it, or foot and mouth disease. So we don't have to invest, for example, in foot and mouth disease and anthrax vaccine banks and make sure that we've got the right serotypes there. Instead, it can be just-in-time manufacture to deliver a vaccine which is particular to that strain of virus. And that can also help our livestock industries in terms of endemic diseases. I can see that there's a huge potential here. We talk about a One Health approach. You know, we need to manage our antibiotic use in livestock industries. And I do have to give a shout out to the livestock industries because they do a stellar job there. But we know what the future looks like for us. And if we can use technology and vaccines in order to improve the health and well-being and welfare of our livestock, there are flow-on effects to other sectors as well.
So do you think there needs to be more investment there?
I believe, yes, I'd have to say we definitely need to be investing. I mean, you can look internationally. I think there's moves afoot, you know, other governments, et cetera, are very aware of, you know, this is a serious weakness. But for Australia, because we have had to buy in vaccines, and I'm not just talking about for COVID, we're a very small market for vaccine manufacturers. So we really need to develop our capability in this area and also make sure that we've got the infrastructure in place for the future, because as Mal has alluded and Sal and I've heard Sarah say, you know, the future is very, very different. Andrew Metcalfe said it's a fast moving global environment that we operate in.
And investment's probably where I'll pick up on. There's a question about this, and I'll get to that specific question in just a moment. But Sal, Milici, bringing you in from the Freight Trade Alliance, investment would be interesting for you too, because I'd imagine a lot of people in the tight margins of shipping and moving things around the world, dollars matter. So they're not going to willingly start spending money on biosecurity programs if they don't have to.
Yeah. You're spot on. I think for me, there's the desire within, you know, government, industry, the department. There's now the money has been allocated in the recent budget. So now it's more a matter of making those things happen. I think I heard someone say last year the department assessed 6 million documents at the border. We don't want humans assessing 7 million documents in coming years and then 8 million documents. It's just not, it's not sustainable, and it's not efficient use of resources. An example that comes up often is something like an importer of highly manufactured wooden articles. Every shipment comes in, they need to upload PDF documents into a portal, which is then accessed by an officer who has to download it, and they have to navigate a number of systems to analyze these documents to release the shipment. What's really being done in that process that's providing a better biosecurity outcome? It's a lot of verifying documents are done correctly, but no real as far as I can see, mitigation of risk occurs in that process. I think for me and for industry, taking those really low risk import shipments out, using all the technologies that have been discussed by others to give everyone comfort that they really are low risk, that is going to deliver huge benefits and cost savings through time mainly, but also just hard costs. And that's for me the game changer that is right in front of us and sort of needs to be delivered soon.
And just on that, is there a desire for industry to do more to be better in the biosecurity space if it was funded from somewhere else?
Oh, absolutely. And Kathleen was talking about partnership. A lot of industry already are accredited, under an approved arrangement, so they do have that relationship where there is that partnership already. But I think it needs to just be expanded, and that the trust level needs to be increased, where industry can do more, but trust them to do more. And obviously, you're going to have processes in place to ensure that people are doing the right thing. But there can be so much more done where there's 8 million containers coming into the country per year. It'd be great to have a biosecurity officer there opening each one, but that's obviously not possible. But let's get the people doing that really accredited, even more so, trained even more so to deliver even more better biosecurity, but even more efficiently.
Thanks very much, Sal. Sarah, I'm coming back to you here. This one, and I think it was from comments from you, but I might be wrong. It said comments about the importance of social science to solving many of these challenges. How are organisations investing in that capability, or does social science become incorporated for greater impact? Does that go to what you were talking about earlier, or if I missed something here?
I don't think you've missed something. No, I think that's a good question. And look, there's got to be a conscious investment in that aspect of it too, because often when the work's delivered, or we do a good thing and we do it with another group or organisation, it doesn't get communicated, so no one knows. It's really important that that's a conscious thought when you're forming a partnership to deliver work. If that's early warning surveillance for citrus in the north of Australia, for instance, how do you bring people along for that journey? How do you bring people along on that ride? And the best way to do that is to consciously think about what's your communications and engagement plan look like. Who will you talk to in the community? Who are the champions that you would like to also be expressing that message on your behalf? So that's one way to do it. Of course, we've got media before us, and why aren't there more ads around biosecurity on television, for instance? How do we get a message out there to the general public and make it understandable? As Kathleen said, if we're not communicating in a language that people understand, then they're not going to buy into it.
Malcolm, I might bring you in here. You're chair of the National Biosecurity Committee, or co-chair, I should say, and chair of the National Biosecurity Committee and Engagement Network as well. When we're talking investment and money in biosecurity, and I think Andrew Metcalfe even talked about it earlier, saying, well, is government doing enough? They're probably never doing enough. There's always more work to do. what's the trade-off like between deciding to invest in for the now, to biosecurity protections that you need now, but also looking to the future in the technology and the machine learning and other things you're looking at that you've been speaking about earlier today, and putting money there?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. And I'll just finish off on the social science piece, because we have got a national working group. So each jurisdiction, AHF, we're all doing a little bits of social science, trying to understand, and a lot of it's attached to responses, but trying to understand what's happening in community and industry. What we're trying to do is bring all that into one place so that we can learn better from that. But you've actually got to invest in that as well. So there are lessons from each piece of social science that we do that are applicable across into other sectors and other situations. Investing to actually capture that and make some sense of it is really important. So we need to be making sure that we are doing that. I'm not sure we're doing that as well as we could yet. Just in relation to how technologies are used and a whole range of other things. I mean, we can see that there are, point of collection opportunities for in-field diagnostics. We've seen coming out of COVID the importance of genetic sequencing. But up until recently, we actually haven't had national standards across jurisdictions in relation to what we do in the genetic sequencing space, using it as a diagnostic tool, for example. We can use it for tracing, but so that we've invested nationally over the last couple of years in getting those standards up, getting the policies written and the standards up and in place, so we can actually capitalise on the benefits that those technologies bring to us. Generally speaking, it's easy just to say, oh, well, we've got an e-nose or we've got some other technology, 3D x-rays or whatever. Needing to think about what the application of those are across the broader system, I think, is critically important to us as well. And that's the next phase. We picked up in the National Biosecurity Strategy. That's the sort of thing we need to be investing in going forward. Thanks, Warwick.
We've got less than 10 minutes to go on the panel. I'd love to get some final thoughts from you all in a moment. But while you're thinking about that, did love this question. It came early on, but I've held it towards the end, so apologies to the person who asked it. But it said, we talk a lot about transformation and doing things differently, but we have a lot to celebrate about what we're already doing well, right? But what do you celebrate the most about the current system? So what's working well? Kathleen, would you like to start us off on that?
Yeah, I've seen some big changes over the last, the time I've been in agriculture. And one of the things, I think is a great achievement is our collaborations and our partnerships. As Mel said, with Plant Health Australia and Animal Health Australia, we have unique bodies that help bridge that. What I'd like to see is how we can connect those better. I mean, a lot of what Sal's talking about, that partnership co-investment approach. So how do I get better at talking to businesses that may provide inputs to agriculture? What are you doing around that biosecurity space? What planning? How can we help? How can we help you with your preparedness? Because, we all want to prevent things coming in, and we should be prepared about what we're going to do when something does come. And I think that is a unique strength of Animal Health Australia and Plant Health Australia and our government and industry members.
Sarah, Plant Health Australia, what's working well?
Look, it excites me every time I see us come up with a joint project with one of our members, or even perhaps someone who isn't a member. And this sort of goes to what Kathleen was talking about, is that we have those strong partnerships with our government and industry bases. And how do we bring in the sort of the non-traditional members to organisations like Plant Health Australia and Animal Health Australia? And they're the questions that Kathleen and I ponder, which is fantastic, and another great outcome from today's session. I wouldn't have necessarily had an opportunity to meet Sal, for instance, who is one of those people at the front line in his industry that is responsible for this. And now we've got this connection. So we've got an opportunity to talk to each other about how can we help each other in this space? What resourcing do you need? Is there training that we can provide or offer or point you in the direction of, that sort of thing? That's what excites me, is that when I see these ideas or concepts of people come to life, whether that's, through our industry groups or more broadly, that's what really makes me excited about the future of biosecurity.
Well, Sal, after such a ringing endorsement, we have to come to you. What's working well from an industry perspective?
Look, perhaps I've been a little critical so far about what hasn't happened, but I think there's no question that the desire from all levels of government and other agencies is really exciting now. There is so much happening. There's so much being worked on. There's even, I wanted to talk about the simplified trade system, but which is sort of a whole government approach around making trade simpler. Just even things like that. We're definitely heading in the right direction, and just the desire and the engagement that I personally get from everyone within the Department of Agriculture, for example, is so positive. And so I think the future is really exciting, and really can't wait to be part of it.
Malcolm, I'll come to you. What's working well in current biosecurity work?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. And I'm going to echo a little bit what others have said. I think the national systems we've got in place, the intergovernmental agreement, the deeds, they're pretty unique, and they enable us to mount a response very quickly. The consultative committees and the way that they work, we have a very joined up system for a federation, and I'd suggest in the biosecurity space, probably second to none almost. So that's working incredibly well. We're starting to invest more in technology, and I'm really excited about that. And I think there are very lots of green shoots there that we can capitalise on going forward. Thanks, Warren.
So just to finish up, we've got 4 minutes left. I'd love sort of a final thought or something to watch for in the future from all four of you, if that's okay, or for something our audience should be considering for the future as well. Malcolm, can I start with you, since we won't just keep going in the same order? Let's mix it up. What's something you think we should be watching for the future, or a final thought?
Yeah, thanks, Warwick. As we've seen over the last 10 years or so, the risk just keeps going up. And we know while we're seeing more investment from government, the resources will never be sufficient. So I think going into the future, we need to be thinking about managing our priorities better than what perhaps we have in the past. We know, for example, established pests and diseases draw a lot of resources at a state level. We know that we all have a sense of shared responsibility, and how we manage that from a policy point of view, so that we can invest more in the left-hand side of the invasion curve, how we can do more in surveillance, prevention, preparedness, all the stuff that we now, everyone's aware of in relation to COVID. I think there's an opportunity for us to move more into that space and invest more in that space. The challenge, of course, is that the community don't necessarily see, or hadn't historically seen, the value in investing in that area. They'd much rather see us invest in killing cane toads. However, there is a real economic rationale behind why we should be investing more in that surveillance and preparedness stuff. Thanks, Warren.
Sal, I might come back to you. What are you most excited about for the future?
I think it was kind of the topic that Kathleen and Sarah wanted to talk about. It was around that shared responsibility, and I think that is the answer, and it's what I'm most excited about. I think it's really important that, instead of talking about shared decision making, I think we as industry need to get in even before that. It's got to be shared, question discovering. So before, it's not about being involved in the decision being made. It's taking it a few steps back and being involved in what the question is, what the problem is, and then going from there.
Fantastic. Sarah, I'll come to you.
I think it was what Malcolm was talking about. There's this thing called the invasion curve, if people haven't ever heard of it. But, imagine a traditional graph with a bell in it. And if you think about it in the context of biosecurity, the front end of the graph is where the preparedness space is. And we've often, the investment has come over the years when a pest arrives, and it's like, right, it's action stations, everyone, what are we going to do about it? How about that investment? What if we invested all of those many millions of dollars that have gone towards those eradication efforts? Let's put it in that front end so that we're prepared. And as I was talking about earlier, and as everyone's explained, I think today, or echoed the sentiment, is that, let's prepare ourselves so that the impacts are much less for us.
Kathleen, the final word comes to you. What would you like to say from the self-described Pearl Girls of Biosecurity, as you and Sarah were describing it to me before?
Yes.
What are you looking for the future?
Well, thank you for that plug, Warwick. Well, the shared responsibility. So I'm really excited about what can be achieved in this space about, if the most important piece, and I think it is, I mean, we can have great technology, but we still need people, and we still need to work with people and get them over the line. What are we going to be doing in the education system? But how are we going to turn this moment into a mass movement? What are we going to do differently here? For Animal Health Australia, it's how will we be better connected with other sectors? Because as Andrew Metcalfe said, we're really only as good as the sum of our parts. And what can I learn from other sectors? What can I learn from the Drought and Innovation Hubs? What can I learn from Landcare? And if you really want to be part of the conversation, then come along to the Australian Biosecurity Symposium, early May. This is where the discussion occurs. And out of the last Biosecurity Symposium, we had 5 action points. One of those was how do we create this mass movement? And I'm really proud to say we also had one of those action items. We must have a national biosecurity strategy, and we must have an investment plan around that. So thanks, Warwick, and thanks, everybody.
Well, Kathleen Plowman, Sarah Corcoran, Malcolm Letts, Sal Milici, thank you all for joining us today. We've had invasion curves, pigs on couches, social science, talked about investment, talked about technology. I hope you got something out of it today. I certainly did. Thanks again to ABARES for putting this on, and thank you to you for joining us and asking your questions today. I hope we answered them. We didn't quite get through them all, but I'm sure we can endeavour to get some more answers to you. Thanks for joining us today, and that will end the session.